So here we go. We are beginning the ladder's finest tournament now. I have Dactor with me, and we will be starting in just about 4 minutes. The players have signed up, and by the looks of it, this is going to be our lineup. We have Ice Power, Call Harmon, The Viking, Zero, Moore, Tweety Conway, Bob Tresh, and Felix taking up the top 8 positions at the moment. We'll see if that stands as we jump into the tournament. So it should be pretty exciting though. This is using my ranked ladder bot on my Discord, and the top players with highest elo have been given priority to sign up. So with that out of the way, let's get into the games. So starting off with the tournament, it's going to be Ice Power against Extraordinary Life of Felix. Ice Power as the Dark Elves, Felix as the Empire. I guess I'll start off on the Dark Elf side. Looking at Ice Power's build, it's looking like a very similar one to the build we saw earlier. In previous tournaments, Scourge Runner Chariots, Feral Manticores, and Morathi, yep, as is his usual standard favorite lineup. A really nice sniping squad, and as long as you make sure they don't get charged by something like Friends, they're generally quite powerful. Their AoEs are really strong too, so we'll see if he's able to implement that in this game. Lots of Cold One Knights, a lot of Elite Cavalry, and a few Dark Riders too. So with that, and of course he has some Chaff Infantry, but that's not especially exciting. So with that, Dactor, what do we have for the Empire side?
So, on the Empire side, we have Volkmar the Grim, we have an Amethyst Wizard with Spirit Leech, we have a couple of Huntsmen, and then a ton of infantry. It looks like a mixture of Flagellants, Sigmar Sons, Spearmen, and Halberdiers, interestingly enough. No cavalry whatsoever, so very low on the mass side of things. We'll have to see how he deals with those Scourge Runner Chariots. And then, well, I suppose I'm going to answer my own question. He has 2 great cannons, including the Hammer of the Witches ROR. So it's a very interesting Empire build, very defensive. Normally, even when you go defensive, you have a couple of Empire Knights just for mass, so that way you can block up Scourge Runner Chariots and punish the enemy for cycle charging. But he's foregoing that for just having more infantry and having those cannons to punish the chariots instead. So I do think the cannons will need to do a lot of work on the approach. But if they can, this could work out quite nicely.
Yeah, and they do definitely have some pretty nice targets here in the form of the Scourge Runner Chariots. I imagine Ice Power will be able to dodge with his Morathi and Manticore squad while keeping the cavalry away, but shutting down those chariots will be very impactful. They are extremely expensive and squishier given the updates that happened a while back. So see if they get taken out. I am a little bit worried too about the lower cavalry count on the Empire, but we've been seeing a lot of Empire infantry defensive builds as of late, especially since the halberd change. How do you feel about that shift in the meta?
You know, I think it's pretty solid for the most part. People have kind of recognized that the Empire has most of their killing power in their range tools, at least in a typical build. So they've just been going all in on protecting them at the expense of a more balanced build. You know, now that I notice it, it actually does look like this Amethyst Wizard is flying, which that's quite interesting to me. I'm not entirely sure why you'd have a Spirit Leech caster flying. That's an extra few hundred gold for really like one of the cheapest casters, and that's kind of why it's so good. But we'll have to see if he's able to use that maybe to harass Morathi a bit, or if it's just to protect him because he knows that Ice Power likes to go for goons with those dull Manticores and Morathi.
Yeah, if microed correctly, he will actually be able to avoid them fairly efficiently. His speed is 105, about the same as Morathi, and faster than the Manticore, so I imagine he'll be able to stay alive, but if he does get charged, it will be a huge loss of income. Now, there's also a very aggressive play from Volkmar too, but it does look like he now pulls back, since if he does go too far, he will likely get sniped out by the hero squad. In this type of build, the Dark Elves have a huge single entity advantage, and the Empire is bringing in more of that infantry advantage here. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Doombolt coming down on the Huntsman too will actually take out only a few models, but right now a big play on Volkmar is actually now going down.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be able to do anything here just because he doesn't have enough mass to surround Volkmar and pin him in. It's actually a really nice charge from some Dark Riders onto Flagellants, but wow, they took a surprising amount of damage there. They actually almost routed off just from that charge, and another Dark Rider also charging, so quite a bit of damage on the approach. Now, actually, this Manticore has managed to get around Volkmar's side and is trying to pin him in with some Cold One Knights. However, being Volkmar, he's just going to stroll on out of there. I think a little bit more importantly, Marathi and a Manticore are getting onto the Hammer of the Witches and a unit of Huntsmen at the same time. And the Scourge Runner Chariots are also getting onto a Great Cannon and a unit of Huntsmen. So pretty much all of the ranged tools for the Empire are being shut down right now, which is a huge play.
Yeah, another soul stealer now coming down onto this huge blob of infantry is going to be doing a lot of damage. And the banishment does go down on the Dark Elf infantry, but mostly misses. It looks like the Empire front line is beginning to collapse. That's going to be a bit of a worry for the Empire side, especially for those huntsmen, which looks like they've actually been entirely taken out or occupied. They aren't really able to fire much anymore. And I'm a little bit worried for the Empire now, especially with that passive buff coming in for the Dark Elves.
Yeah, the great timing on that murderous prowess, and Volkmar also now getting chased and gooned by Marathi plus a Manticore. He's going to be struggling to have a huge impact in this game if that continues. And indeed, another Manticore is rampaging through all of the Empire troops and onto Volkmar. That is some pretty amazing RNG, and Volkmar is down under half HP now as the entire Empire backline collapses and their front line seems soon to follow.
Yeah, nice play from Ice Power too, leaving those cavalry in reserves just to pick off any troops that rout off. It's super efficient just because his cavalry takes no damage chasing them, and it allows them to avoid the halberdiers for the most part, which they definitely don't want to be facing.
Ooh, Marathi is caught up in spears and halberds. She shouldn't have trouble getting away, and indeed it looks like she probably will be able to, but if she somehow gets gooned here, then that would be maybe enough to start turning this game back around, but I can't imagine her not having the mass to get out of this.
Yeah, especially if Ice Power is focusing on her, which it does look like he is trying to force path her through. A big Soul Stealer on the infantry too will bring them very low, and their leadership is actually nearly broken. One of the Manticores actually got there. They could rout them off, but it doesn't really matter. Marathi manages to escape, and it looks like the final charge into Volkmar is now coming down.
Ooh, big Doombolt as well, doing about 600 damage, bringing him down to only 700 HP, and the Scourge Runner Chariots even are shooting in now and doing pretty solid work against him. The balance of power significantly in the Dark Elves' favor, but honestly, the game state is even more in their favor. And on top of anything else, there's nothing at all to deal with these Scourge Runner Chariots anymore. I do think that the lack of mass in this Empire build maybe was a bit of a problem. The Scourge Runners were able to just kind of roll through and get onto all of the ranged pieces without much to punish them.
Yeah, and even though Volkmar can do okay on the mass department, he is but a single lord, and in general he doesn't really want to be fighting a lot of these fights against chariots. He doesn't have a lot of speed to catch them, and with that, it looks like this will likely be game. Volkmar now on the very brink of death, but his Unbreakable does keep him in for a few more seconds. But now, expecting some army losses to come in, and a pretty decisive first win coming in from Ice Power.
Yep. And A Move Hacker bringing up a great point in chat right now, which I hadn't noticed, but he was spirit leeching, or Felix was spirit leeching Marathi rather than Cold One Knights or Scourge Runner Chariots, and I'm just not sure if that's the most efficient play there because Marathi actually isn't as much of a win condition in this particular matchup in these builds. And she's just going to heal back any Spirit Leech damage because Spirit Leech, while it does do okay damage, it's not going to be a ton of damage to someone like Marathi with magic resist. and Soul Stealer will heal her back up pretty much no problem, as opposed to more permanent damage onto Scourge Runners or Cold One Knights.
Yeah, that the Soul Stealers really will be able to keep her alive for a very long time. And even if you are spirit leeching single entities when they're mounted up, like Marathi was, they have enough HP where they can almost drain out your entire Winds of Magic pool worth of spirit leeches. So it would have needed a very long game to actually finish her off. Pretty rough, but on to the next game. So starting with the second game of Felix against Ice Power, we have these Skaven coming in with three large single entities, that being 2 Brood Horrors, 1 mounted by Thought, and a Plague Priest coming in with his Mortis Engine effect and a ton of summons. Also the AoE tier, or a cone-shaped AoE, which should do okay against a lot of the unarmored Greenskins infantry. Some Rat Ogres too, just to provide a little bit of mass, and a lot of Skaven Slaves to hold up the lines as long as possible, so that these Poison Wind Mortars and Globadiers can put in their damage, and that will likely be the win condition other than the single entities here. The new addition of the Wolf Rats poison variant should be interesting too. They will usually die out to mass Spider Riders and Skirmishers from the Greenskins, but if you do pull out the map advantage, you can usually chase off quite a few troops from the Greenskins. So with that, what do we have on the Greenskin side, Doctor?
So for the Greenskins, we are seeing Grom the Paunch, a front line of just regular goblins and the 8P Clooney's Night Goblin Fanatic ROR, backed up by Quad Stone Troll, which we have been seeing this more recently, although I don't think it's meta against Skaven most of the time, but it makes a lot of sense. They're relatively strong against the Poison Wind effects, and because of that, they'll retain their killing power throughout most of the game. We also see quite a bit of cheap mobility. It looks like 4 Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers, and then 2 regular Forest Goblin Spider Riders, as well as a Giant River Troll Hag with, is that, I believe, aspect of the Dread Knight to give essentially terror and immune to psychology to the Stone Trolls, and Spirit Leech, probably for the mortars and weapon teams.
Yeah, so pretty interesting rush build. There is no Black Orc Big Boss, and we've been seeing the Black Orc Big Boss being taken a lot less often since his nerf. It was only an extra 100 gold though, right?
Yeah, but you know, it's really, I think, more because of Grom. Grom is so common in the meta right now, and with Grom, you can skimp out on the Bob pretty, safely, just because of the immune to that psychology aura that Grom himself gives. And yeah, I think people started to kind of catch on that for the price, Bob oftentimes didn't entirely perform except for the ITP. So where, you used to see him taken even if you didn't really need the ITP occasionally, now people are more likely to go with double Giant River Troll Hag actually than even a more typical looking hero squad of a Giant River Troll Hag and Bob.
Yeah, and a lot of the times you would see him get sniped out from some certain builds too, just Spirit Leeches also. But in this case, he won't be coming into play as we get into the main match. The Greenskin frontline climbing into the Skaven Slaves and Clan Rats should be able to push through relatively easily. Brood Horrors are coming in, and we're seeing a possible snipe attempt on this River Troll Hag.
Ooh, that would be quite effective. However, Mither going down will be helping out quite a bit. Now, the Stone Trolls are all coming in, and if they can pin in Throt and the Brood Horror, that'll be really effective. However, it's also worth noting that the Greenskins are blobbing up quite a bit, which means they're taking a ton of damage from the Poisoned Wind effects. And while they aren't as susceptible as, maybe a more infantry-heavy frontline, the monsters are still going to be taking damage over time from these mass amounts of Poisoned Wind, so they have to be very careful.
Now, I did forget to mention, there were actually some units of Storm Vermin in the Skaven build. And they've actually managed to push off one unit of Stone Trolls, but a Fanatic Bomb routes off the second. Meanwhile, in this center line fight with many of the Greenskins fighting against, Rat Ogres and the double Brood Horror, things are trading fairly effectively, but I think the main problem here is that the Stone Trolls are actually managing to retain their leadership. And as long as they don't rout, they're going to be doing a ton of damage. You can see the Rat Ogres falling pretty quickly, and the Skaven are beginning to run out of infantry.
Yeah, and the backline compromised now as the mass mobility for the Greenskins managing to get back there. They're shutting everything down. They're routing off a ton of the lower leadership units of the Skaven, and they should be able to chase everything off the battlefield relatively effectively. So I'm really liking the Greenskins' place in this battle right now. As long as they can pick off Throt the Unclean and his Brood Horror friend, they should be able to carry this game out, I think. And one of the Brood Horrors is actually at only 9 leadership. He is wavering, and if he breaks, that would be huge.
Yeah, but at the very least, on the Skaven side, the mobility of the Greenskins has been pretty hampered. A lot of the Forest Goblin Spider Riders are quite damaged and prone to routing. But that might not matter here if the Brood Horror and Throt actually get killed. Their leadership is holding out fairly well. It looks like Throt will be able to escape too. Hopefully, at least for Felix, so that he can continue to cycle charge all the single entities of the Greenskins. Still though, there's a lot of mass, and that'll be able to pin down all the Brood Horrors, really shutting down their mobility advantage. A nice pick on the River Troll Hag too. She might actually rout off, but Throt has taken a ton of damage so far.
Yeah, some really nice summon plays as well. The Rat Ogre summon doing a ton of damage, and continuous summons from the Plague Priest, really keeping the Skaven afloat in this game. I do still think they're in some serious trouble, but they have a chance to come back into it right now, as some of their units actually do manage to come back online from routing, as Ice Power maybe being a little bit greedy with his mobility. Rather than chasing units down, he sent them in, and now they're pretty much all dead, so he will have some trouble routing off units that do break.
Yeah, and heading into the late game now, there are still a few Forest Goblin Spider Riders, but they're not really enough to chase off units especially effectively. The Stone Trolls are getting routed off by the single entities here, and it's basically just Grom left in the mix. Of course, the Stone Trolls will be able to rally, as I think the Wolf Rats have been killed off entirely, or at least are very low, and Grom is going to be a very scary target to take down here. The two Brood Horrors can fight him fairly effectively, but only if they have a lot of infantry support. Otherwise, just since they are so beat up, Grom will likely be able to finish them off.
Yeah, now some of these Stone Trolls should be coming back in time, but with so much damage to them, they'll actually have a lot of trouble staying in combat for more than a second or two, or even reaching combat, really, just because their leadership is so terrible. So I think Ice Power may be pulling back now, just to try and recoup and regroup, and allow his Stone Trolls to regen a little bit. As you can see, the Skaven are actually routing to nothing en masse, as the balance of power swings back in the Greenskin favor.
Yeah, I think those routing Stone Trolls and their fear effect might have actually caused that mass rout. Skaven, of course, their leadership is extremely low, but that was a bit of a surprising rout. Maybe just the rout of the Plague Priest might have done it, and that's going to be a huge lead for Ice Power now. His Stone Trolls are actually regenerating their stamina in the back, and that actually gives you a pretty nice leadership buff, so as soon as they go back into combat, we'll be expecting them to stay in the fight for quite a bit longer. Not to mention, this actually buys time for Grom to get his Lucky Banner effect too. And using that, it should give a nice... never mind, he does not have his leadership buff. So there's still a chance that the Trolls could get routed, but it doesn't look like that'll be the case.
Yeah, it's looking quite rough for the Skaven right now. The Brood Horrors will really need to hard carry the rest of this game out. We will see a really nice aspect of the Dread Knight going down, making all of these Greenskin units ITP. And with that, they should have no trouble at all sticking in against Throt and his Brood Horror buddy. they get a full surround and will just be wailing away at those monsters. And with that, I think the greenskins should have no trouble closing this game out from here. However, Aspect of the Dread Knight will wear out in just a second here, and once it does, there is a chance for a mass terror rout.
Yeah, the one of the trolls is very low, and it does look like it gets terror routed, debuffing the leadership of the others. The Brood Horrors do have fairly good leadership too. They can't stay in the fight surprisingly long, as long as they don't take too much damage, but the combination of the River Troll Hag plus Grom the Paunch coming in looks like they're going to be able to clean things out. A pretty clean 2 games for Ice Power. I do really like that aspect of the Dread Knight, sort of acting as a pseudo Black Orc big boss with that spell, working out pretty well in that final engagement. GG and well played to Ice Power, as it
Huge
looks.
value
Yeah.
from the stone trolls. Wow.
Oh, let's take a look. Looks like, yeah, paying for themselves and a little bit more too. For a unit that can get routed off so easily, being able to get that value and still have many models left by the end of the game is it really shows their effectiveness. Even the Spider Riders too, that sort of traded in to other units, basically all paid for themselves. And the 8-peak loonies also. So honestly, the whole build looked like it was working really effectively there. The Globadiers were quite effective, but the quick engage really it shut down most of the effectiveness of the poison wind.
I suppose I'll go over the Lizardmen if that's all right. So we have a Slan Mage Priest of Light coming in with Net, Barona's Time Warp, and Fa's Protection, as well as pretty much every item and ability. We then have double Feral Stegodon, which is actually a very unexpected pick. Cool to see. We have a singular unit of Chameleon Skinks, a single unit of Pterodon Riders. It's the Powhawk Sentinels ROR. We have a single Cold One Rider, and then a front line with some Temple Guards. It looks like 2 in total. 2 Saurus Warriors with shields, and the cohort of Sotek Red Crested Skink RWAR for the Unbreakable, as well as triple Skink cohort with javelins to provide a little bit of ranged firepower. But overall, it seems like a pretty straightforward build where he's just going to try and mash into the Viking army and kill him straight up. So, what does the Viking have to counter this?
Well, the Viking has brought a pretty fun build here. To start off with the most exciting choices, we have a double Exalted Hero on Manticores, very Ice Power style, with a just very strong Gooning squad. Will be really good for those Stegodons, as long as they don't take too much damage. Exalted Heroes are a little bit of a glass cannon unit, since they can actually, they can't be healed, which is what makes them really squishy. Sartorial too, coming in with the no final transmutation, but Plague of Rust and Searing Doom. The Plague of Rust should do pretty well if we do have a lot of Marauder Horsemen and Horse Masters, and that looks to be the case. Bringing in the best of both worlds, a strong cycle charging cavalry force that can also do well against the monstrous targets, since that Plague of Rust can reduce armor by up to 60 period, and once that goes down, the Stegodons will be falling fairly quickly unless they fall into a safer position. So getting into the game, the Marauder, actually no, I forgot, the infantry front line for the Viking is actually a little bit more interesting here, as we are actually seeing 2 units of normal Chosen. One of the few matchups where you do actually see Chosen sometimes is against the Lizardmen. But I'm not a huge fan of it myself. How do you feel about this double Chosen picked, Actor?
Well, I think typically you'd actually see Chosen with halberds rather than the regular Chosen, or even Chosen with great weapons. I'm not sure how the generic Chosen do against Temple Guard. I suppose that's probably why he picked them, was just to cut through Temple Guard, or maybe just Saurus. But Given how frontline heavy this Lizardman build is, it might not actually be a bad idea. They should be able to get in there, and I think they would trade relatively effectively. Although, with Barona's Time Warp supporting the Lizardman frontline, that may not be the case.
Some cohort of Sotek slamming into the Chosen 2 is basically the worst matchup that they can run up against, but they're still trading fairly effectively and they will hold for a really long time. And really the main problem for the Lizardmen right now is that these Marauder Horsemen skirmishers have almost free reign until the front line starts collapsing for Chaos.
Yeah, the Powhawk Sentinels are not going to be able to really pressure them either. You can see one Chaos Marauder is already breaking, but the Chosen, oh man, the Chosen getting hit with a huge banishment. They were holding really firmly, but with that, they're actually looking pretty rough, and the other Chosen also getting beaten up pretty badly by this Feral Stegodon and cohort of Sotek combo. Now, the Plague of Rust onto the Feral Stegodon, not getting as much damage as the Viking probably would have hoped, and I think the Lizardmen are starting to look relatively strong here. They have this really strong pocket in the middle, but they've managed to break through the strongest parts of this Chaos force, as the Chosen are both broken off the field now, neither one getting even close to their value, and with that, I think the Chaos might be in some serious trouble.
Yeah, an overcast Searing Doom coming down onto all the skinks misses entirely also, and that's really painful. And honestly, not having those final transmutations are going to be really rough in this single entity fight, but some pretty nice charges from the Exalted Heroes could change things up quite drastically. Actually slamming into the Stegodon, taking out about a third of its HP with that initial charge, but the second Stegodon comes into support, and I think this will really be deciding it, how well the single entities actually fight here.
Yeah, you can actually see that all of these skin cohorts with javelins coming in now and able to fire in onto the Exalted Heroes, doing huge damage. They might not be, the most powerful ranged units, but those javelins do hurt when they have them. And man, they are really hurting now, as one of the Exalted Heroes is broken off, and this whole Chaos pocket here is starting to collapse, and the Lizardmen go up pretty significantly on the balance of power.
Yeah, those the range units really are so important for these types of melee blob fights, that or some large spell casting, since they can really tip the balance in your favor. And Call Harmon, coming out slightly on top, was able to push out most of the Marauder Horsemen to set up that situation. That one Exalted Hero does manage to rally though, so he's not out of the battle entirely, and there are still a lot of Marauder Horsemen left. If the range units of the Lizardmen do go down, they will have free reign to pick off the Stegodons. But we are seeing Sartorial now actually diving in onto a Feral Stegodon. A pretty bad matchup for him, and he might actually get killed off here.
Yeah, he's taking a ton of damage. His Unbreakable status will keep him alive for now, but he doesn't have healing of any kind, and he's down to only 1600 HP. And that's really the big problem here for the Chaos, is that all of their killing power is in these single entities, which are all extremely low at the moment. And they won't have any real support, because while these ranged cavalry are pretty good and cost effective, they aren't the kind of unit that will hard carry a game for you typically. And you can see the balance of power very in favor of the Lizards as well, kind of recognizing that game state.
Yeah, they do begin to regroup with their forces. They can chase off this first Exalted Hero. He will likely not be coming back. He's just a little bit too low on that HP front. And there's still a pretty decent amount of firepower for the Lizardmen. Just a single unit of Chameleon Skinks and some Skink cohort with Javelins should be able to push back the Marauder Horsemen, especially since they are nearly out of ammunition too, so they shouldn't be too much of a threat. As for the Exalted Hero, it does look like he finally goes down, and the final engagement is beginning. Just the Stegodons chasing off a few of the Chosen. They held out for a surprisingly long amount of time, but after the spells started going down, they just really weren't able to pull out the victory for Chaos this time.
Yeah, I do wonder if Chaos wasn't expecting the double Temple Guard pick. Temple Guard with the support of Barona's Time Warp seemed to just wreck the Chosen, especially with that one banishment going down. But even without the banishment, on the other side, the cohort of Sotek also traded really well with the Chosen. So I kind of question the pick. Um, they certainly didn't pay for themselves here, and I think there's a reason why you typically don't see them in really any matchup. I mean, yeah, they cost what is it? Almost 1,400 gold, I believe, and only about 1,000 value between the two of them combined. So certainly
Oof.
not the greatest.
Yeah, the exalted champions too, or heroes, I forget, also getting in even less value than the Chaos Chosen, coming in at a fairly expensive price on Manticores. Really, they just weren't able to kill off the single entities of the Lizardmen. One of the Segadons even getting almost 2,000 damage value. Really helped carry out the day. Even the Temple Guard performing fairly well. But really, I think one of the hidden heroes here were really these skinks with javelins. They were able to push back the Marauder Horsemen and also finish off the single entities of Chaos.
Coming in here, and it looks like the Viking is just rearranging his army. He is coming in with Wurzag, actually, with Effigy of the Git, Fists of Gork, and what is that spell? I think we might be seeing something interesting here. It is Edbutt. Yeah, wow. Edbutt and Fists of Gork on Wurzag with the Bonewood Staff and all of his typical stuff, including Effigy to get. So I suppose that's just a cheap spell, which will probably be killing archers, maybe cavalry, I'm not sure, and just getting cheap procs of his Bonewood Staff. Then we have a trillion infantry with Orc Boys, Orc Boy Biggins, and Goblins just dotted across the front line with one unit of Black Orcs in the center and the Night Goblin Fanatic RORs present as well. Then we have, it looks like, regular Orc War Boys supporting, and a few Forest Goblin Spider Riders, as well as a Goblin Big Boss. So a very straightforward, very wide rush build coming in from the Viking. What do the Bretonians have to try and match that?
For the Bretonians, we are actually seeing a little bit more than their usual peasant frontline, this time coming in with 5 spearmen at arms, all with shields. They'll be holding the line against the cavalry, and also doing fairly well against cheaper greenskins infantry too, holding for a decent amount of time and trading sort of evenly against goblins, although not great. Peasant bowmen in the back line, with 2 of them having pox arrows, will surely be helping in the cavalry fight, as they won't be doing they don't do too much damage against the infantry. As for the cavalry, going to be a mix of Knights of the Realm, Knights Errant, and Questing Knights. A mix of elite and cheaper cavalry. We'll see if they're controlled well enough to win out against these boar boys. Generally, they will be able to win a straight up fight, but the infantry support could tip the favor either way. Of course, for the hero squad coming in, we are seeing the Fey Enchantress, the Chalice of Potions, the let's see here, what is it called? The Dwellers Below. Very interesting pick. Could actually do really well against the Black Orcs or the Cavalry, depending on where it goes down. Some healing, and the usual double Paladin. It's going to be a mobile force, all of them on mounts. So this cavalry force from the Bretonians should actually be really strong once they get supported by spells. We'll have to see if the Viking has what it takes to try and pull an advantage there, because a straight up fight will definitely go really badly in his against his favor.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I'm guessing that the Spearman at Arms spam is actually just because of the recent builds that have been coming in favor for the greenskins, which are more rush oriented. Just trying to hold for that couple seconds longer will be crucial. And this is definitely a new build from the Viking. I don't think I've seen this before or heard of it before, so I'm really curious to see how it will be doing. It has a lot of killing power for sure, and it's very wide. But at the same time, it has a lot of weak links. The regular goblins, especially, will be breaking off pretty quickly if they get charged by cavalry. and I don't even believe they have any kind of charge defense. So even frontal charges, while they're braced, will be doing a ton of damage. Um, but Cal Harmon will need to be very careful and control his units very well, I think, in order to get full value out of them.
Yeah, and one huge advantage he has, though, is that the Fey Enchantress will be a little bit hard to pick off, given that the Viking doesn't have too many powerful single entities. If she gets surrounded by cavalry, the Goblin Big Boss can debuff her and likely get her killed. But if Call Harmon is careful about it, this hero squad could actually pose a pretty big threat here. Now, starting off the game, the Night Goblin Fanatics have already taken a pretty decent amount of damage, and a nice charge against the Orc Boys, actually getting them down to half HP really quickly, pulling back the cavalry to make sure that they stay safe. In the
Yeah,
center,
surprising amount of damage actually onto the Knights of the Realm there as well, though.
oh, actually, yeah, on the disengage, down to 2/3 HP. But Fey Enchantress and Double Paladin, they're going to be getting charged by Orc Boys, but I think that's sort of almost intentional from Call Harmon, as they can actually take that fight fairly effectively. You can see they are all at full HP, and the archers can support in that fight also.
Yeah, now the Bretonians are kind of on a timer here. Their front line, even though it's a little better, will inevitably be getting killed pretty quickly. And a whiffed Chalice of Potions onto those Orc Boar Boys back there, managing to force them off of the Fey, but that's about it. And now they're going to come right back in. So I'm actually a little bit concerned for this Bretonian hero squad right now. They're in a very dangerous place, but it looks like the Viking not able to punish them at the moment. Um, Now, just a ton of combat spread out all across the map. A lot of rear charges coming in from the Bretonians is very nice. Cal Harmon managing to kill off some Boar Boys. Um, the Edbutt coming down onto the Peasant Bowman with Pox Arrows actually not really doing much of anything. So not the greatest spell cast there, but it's not bad. Now a huge Wah coming in. This is a really nice timing on that Wah for the Greenskins. They'll be getting a ton of buffs from it, and they are breaking through the front line relatively rapidly now, as the Bretonians are really struggling to get full value out of their cavalry. You can see they're all getting picked off and losing models quite quickly here, as the Greenskins seem to be taking a little bit of a lead in this game.
Yeah, in the back, however, backline of the Greenskins, the Fey Enchantress is holding out quite firm, even with the Goblin Big Boss in the center there. So that might still be the late game advantage that Call Harmon needs. In the meantime, the right flank of the cavalry have taken a lot of damage. Like you said, they've been taking quite a beating. Essentially, the cavalry has been used to hold up the Greenskin infantry, since the front line of the Bretonians is falling. And since they actually have to stay in combat for much longer, that's really the main cause of all the damage that they're taking. But still, things could change quite largely as that Goblin Big Boss gets brought down to below half HP. He is the main source of killing power against the Bretonian hero squad, and it's imperative that Viking actually keeps that Big Boss alive.
Yeah, Black Orcs should have no trouble dragging down the Fey Enchantress in the late game as well. It might take a little while, but overall they do decent damage to her. So I think that the Bretonians have to find some way to shut them down as well. But man, I mean, it just seems like all across the battlefield, the Greenskins are overrunning the Bretonian positions. And the Bretonian cavalry has really underperformed this game, I think. It got some nice side charges and some nice frontal charges as well, but not a ton of damage all across the board, and they got picked off quite quickly. Now, a really nice Chalice of Potions in the backline does manage to kill a couple of Greenskin infantry off, and the Viking sending the Goblin Big Boss in relatively unsupported now is certainly ill-advised, and it will probably be getting picked off here quite quickly. The Night Goblin ROR are coming in to try and help, but yeah, a double hit onto the Goblin Big Boss. He goes below 500 HP, now below 200, and he will be routing off. But the Fey Enchantress also extremely low and very low leadership as well, nearly routing off herself. And if she goes, then I'm pretty sure this game goes.
Yeah, still a pretty decent trade, even though he lost the Goblin Big Boss, especially because these Black Orcs are at almost full HP, about 75%. And like you said, they can actually drag down this Paladin squad and the Fey Enchantress. So I think the Viking might be okay. The rest of the greenskin forces are quite battered, but they're still strong enough to easily chase off the rest of the Bretonians. In the meantime, Enchantress and Double Paladin moving outwards. They looking like they might actually want to go for a snipe attempt on Warzag, and that could actually change things pretty well for the Bretonians. Essentially, all the rest of the greenskins are so battered, they will likely route off the map if they actually go in for a blob fight against a healthy single entity squad. And the loss of leadership will affect them a lot. It will really just come down to these black orcs and how well they can actually manage the fight here. Warzag actually dodging.
Yeah, ring around the rosy from the Bretonians rather than actually trying to kill him. Effigy of the Git goes down, and I think Cal Harmon recognized that the Enchantress was likely to be brought down there, as the Hail Mary play going after Warzag does not work out. And with that, this series will be tied up and we'll be going to an ace match. Pretty exciting to be sure.
And just taking a quick look at the value of those boar boys, absolutely crazy. One of them with 0 kills, still getting 570 damage value, charging onto the single entities of Bretonia. Doing really well. As for the others, they managed to charge into cavalry, and they really did pay for themselves, especially considering how cheap they are. That was really good coming in from the Viking.
Yeah, certainly. It looked like a very scary build. The Goblin Big Boss also getting a ton of value, like 1,300 value just onto the Fey Enchantress for the most part. He did get picked off, but he certainly paid for himself many times over before he did. A heroic little goblin there. And we will see. So now it is Cal Harmon, I think, coming in with the pick 3, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So getting into the ace match between Carl Harmon on the blue side and the Viking as the High Elves on the red. We are seeing, for the Dark Elves, a front line of many spears, along with 2 units of Hargoneth Executioners. Pretty standard, as the Hargoneth Executioners will really dominate that frontline fight. They'll be extremely tanky, and they act as a really solid win condition to actually make sure that they're supported. Of course, we're going to be seeing many Cold One Knights also, even a unit of Cold One Dread Knights,
Wow.
using the recent buff on top of them. We'll see how effective that is. Feral Manticore, a High Beastmaster in the air. That seems a little bit off meta, coming in with his Whiplash ability. He can really buff up the damage of I guess just himself in this situation. A Sorceress of Fire to hit up any High Elf archers, and some Shades. So a little bit atypical, but the front line still remains the same, essentially. You just have to make sure that you're not getting shot too much by the High Elves.
Yeah, and just a minor correction, actually. The High Beastmaster can buff up anyone but himself and the spellcaster. A little bit of a weird ability in that way.
Oh,
It's only for non-heroes, so.
I see. For okay, so you can buff up multi-unit models then.
And actually, probably the Feral Manticore in particular will be the main target.
Yep.
Now, on the High Elf side, we are seeing Wow, this is a very interesting build. So we see Techless coming in with Net, Regrowth, and Bound Fiery Convocation, as well as the Sword of Techless. Yeah, the Sword of Techless. Then we see a Mage of Death with Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna, as well as his Wind of Magic items. So we are going to see the Viking coming in, trying to basically magic the Dark Elves to death. Now, to support that, we have triple Illyrian Reaver Archer. We have a front line of a bunch of Spearmen and Silverin Guard. We have a single unit of the Fireborn Dragon Princes and a single unit of generic archers. So very heavy on the magic in this build.
Yeah, and pretty low on the cavalry front too. Of course, the Silverin will be a huge help in this situation, but they're going to be getting hit up by the Hargoneth Executioners. The counter to that may come down is Techless with his Fiery Convocation, and if he's able to net them and get down that AoE, it could turn the favor heavily into the high elf advantage. You can almost one-shot them if they group up too closely.
Now, I am curious. Do you think that the high elves need to move up slightly closer in order to not be breaking the white line camping rule? It's a little bit difficult to see on this map. He does appear to be slightly close, but you'd have to get out a tape measure to see for sure.
Yeah, we'll see if it'll have to depend, but that will have to come into play after the game concludes. Yeah, we'll see if it comes into play. But for now, front lines advance. The fate of Buna coming down onto those executioners, getting in a lot of damage actually. But it means that there's not as much winds of magic to actually net them down. Still, there should be enough for one net, and Teclis, looking like he's moving up, may throw down the net plus convocation to really secure the infantry fight. If he does manage to do that, that would be a huge advantage for the high elves, since the dark elves won't really be able to punch through the silver end. And there we go, the net comes down. Fiery Convocation gets cast, a nice counterplay from Call Harmon, sort of maneuvering his executioner so they're not lined up, but they still take a lot of damage.
Yeah, wow, huge damage onto both Harganeth Executioner units, and of course no healing means that damage is permanent, so really nice play so far. Will it be enough to secure the frontline advantage, though? I'm not entirely sure. And actually, Teclis getting Tormentor sorted, and he's taking quite a bit of damage. However, he has a lot of innate regen because of his healing item, which also gives him a lot of ward save. So I won't imagine he'll be taking too much damage here. And in fact, the High Beastmaster taking a ton of damage in return, already below half HP, and dropping quickly, and he might die here.
Yeah, an absolute massive charge from those ROR Dragon Princes. Sending in the Manticore to try and pull out the Beastmaster, but a net? Is that a net coming down? No,
it's Spirit Leech. Ooh, man, it will route off. He's below 700 HP now. He is getting worked. And the Arch is even firing, and he dies. That is massive.
Yep, and there we go. A absolute huge loss. A dive in on the Shades too with the Illyrian Reavers, not getting in too much damage. Burning Head on the Spearmen will help the frontline fight, but the Dark Elf forces are going to be routing pretty easily. The Manticore too, actually getting caught out by the Dragon Princes, will likely get taken down, or at least brought extremely low on HP. And the front line of the High Elves is looking pretty strong. They are setting up to actually hold fairly well, just because the Executioners have really taken a lot of damage. But half HP Executioners are still extremely threatening, and you are seeing they are still able to punch through the Silverin Guard at the very least. And the Dark Elves are stabilizing a little bit. I think the biggest play they could really make right now is shutting down these Dragon Princes, probably, and allowing their
and they are getting back
work
there with the Coldwind Knights and even the Coldwind Red Knights as well. And they should be able to win this fight, at least cost effectively, if not actually. And there isn't that much. Okay, so Regrowth is coming down. He actually does have the Winds of Magic for a Regrowth, pretty amazingly. Now that might mean that there's no net Fiery Convocation combo for a little while longer for these remaining Harganeth Executioners. And actually the Shades are still online, and they're able to fire in relatively effectively onto, whatever they choose. But now the Dragon Princes with the Regrowth are holding long enough that Teclis and the Mage are actually able to come in and support them. And they might be able to turn this cavalry fight on its head, as the Coldwind Red Knights are standing alone now at low HP.
Yeah, those Fireborn, the most elite infantry troop you can take, with the High Elves, or at least most elite cavalry, holding out till basically the end. But it looks like they will actually get chased off by the Dread Knights, and there are still a fairly healthy unit of Coldwind Knights for Call Harmon. He still has a quarter HP unit of Harganeth Executioners, and another at also about a quarter to 1/5 HP. That is a lot of elite fighting power for the Dark Elves, and there isn't a whole ton that the High Elves have to actually kill that, unless they throw down a lot more spells.
Ooh, a really nice charge onto these shades is huge. Cal Harmon could have responded in time, but just not quite seeing it before the charge comes in. And the Illyrian Reaver Archers will manage to escape as well after bringing the shades down to 40 models out of 60. So definitely the Dark Elves need everything they have, and those shades being picked off could be enough to seal this game in favor of the High Elves. Now, the High Elves are running low on ammo on these Illyrian Reaver Archers, and a lot of their front line is in tatters, so they will need to rely quite a bit on their kind of remaining scraps of cavalry and their hero squad, actually. Teclis, not known as a melee combatant, but he's not completely terrible. Same for the Mage of Death, and they will be able to at least work some units down. But actually, when you look at it, the Dark Elves seem to have quite a bit more killing power left in their army. Of course, the High Elves with unparalleled amounts of magic might be able to use that in order to seal this game in their favor. But it's actually a pretty close game considering all that's happened.
Yeah, we'll have to see if the magic actually does come into play. There should be enough wins for another net and convocation on the executioner, since I think we only did see one go down. And yeah, there's not a lot left on the High Elf side. Some Silvern, some Illyrian Reaver archers, and normal archers at very low ammunition. In the meantime, these Cold One Knights at actually very high HP should be able to win any cavalry fight, and with the ammunition running low for the High Elves, I honestly don't know what can kill off these executioners other than another Convocation or another Fate of Buna. So nice, the Dark Elves now regrouping. The Shades are able to begin firing, and these Shades are going to be huge for actually going into the late game here. They have a ton of ammunition, and the Viking is going to have to commit quite a few forces to actually shut them down, but a possible gap may be opening up to dive in onto the Shades, but instead getting caught out by a few spears and taking some pretty high damage from these Illyrian Reaver archers. In the meantime, some Silvern do get chased off by the Cold One Knights. And how do you feel about this situation, Doctor?
I think it's definitely very tense. I think in general, the High Elves have a bit of an advantage here because in these late game situations with low HP on all of the infantry units, the full surround actually is often enough of a debuff to break those units en masse with the charge. So I'm really concerned for the Dark Elves' morale here. Also, I do believe they've already used up all of their murderous mastery and prowess. So with that, the Dark Elves will not be getting that massive buff in this late game. And yeah, I mean, we will see the High Elves playing very patiently, trying to get as much winds of magic as they possibly can, I believe, and using the last of their archers' ammo to buy time for Teclis and this mage to regen just a little bit more, as a burning head actually going down on top of the archers does quite a bit of damage, nukes them, and
yeah, and actually marks them off. That's going to keep these Shades alive for a lot longer. Another Convocation coming down on the Executioners that will finish them off. But there's still there's still a second unit of Executioners, and the Convocation actually missing a few. There are still 32 models left, and Executioners do tend to fight to the death, at least nearly to the death, so they'll actually be sticking around. And here we go, the final engagement is beginning. A charge from the Dragon Princes. They are at very low model count though, and the spears will be able to take them out. As for the single entities of the High Elves, it is just Teclis and another mage, not extremely strong in combat. And we're going to be seeing a few routes come in on the High Elf side. It looks like they'll actually be losing their Spearmen and Silverin to the Executioners and Dread Spears of the Dark Elves. And I think, despite the balance of power, Cal Harmon might actually be able to come back from this fairly decisively in the late game.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with how the High Elves chose to take that last engagement. I think in this situation, you really want to get a full surround and then charge in everything at once, but instead, the Viking kind of coming in piecemeal and letting individual units get picked off and countercharged by these Cold One Knights. And the Cold One Knights are really the MVPs here. They're getting so many countercharges, they're doing so much damage, and they're staying alive and providing sort of a stabilizing force for this mass amount of infantry. Now, a big flank charge coming in from Illyrian Reaver archers is not going to be able to do much given their low model count, and the Dark Elves actually have quite stable leadership here as the balance of power goes back to even. And a lot of that balance of power is in Techless and this mage, and they are not good in combat, really. They've been taken just to cast as many spells as possible, but now that it comes down to just them, I don't think they're going to be able to carry out this game.
Yeah, falling in HP, the balance of power tipping back in the favor for Call Harmon for the first time since basically the beginning of the match. Techless will be able to push towards the Supreme Sorceress of Fire, even getting a few hits, but there's basically nothing he can do to kill off the Executioners at this point. The Cold One Knights too, absolute heroes in the late game. They were, yeah, like you said, just cycle charging constantly there as things were finishing out, and that's gonna be it. I think the Viking has actually gone taken out by Call Harmon in this pretty crazy Dark Elf versus High Elf game.
Yeah, wow, what a comeback. Really great job. I mean, losing basically two of your Hargoneth Executioners at the start of the game and then throwing your Lord, and managing to come back from that. Keep your mental and play really solidly throughout the rest of the game to win it out. Very impressive stuff from Cal Harmon.
Whoa,
And it
oh
looks
my
like, yeah,
goodness.
wow.
Absolute nail biter coming in there. Yeah, like I said earlier, those Executioners are a pretty strong win condition. If you look at their damage values, you really need a way to finish them off. Fire Convocation is good against them, but you usually won't be able to kill every single model, and even if a handful of them survive, they will really tear through the front line. The Dragon Princes weren't really able to finish them off, and even though they did kill off the single entities for the Dark Elves, it really it just wasn't enough in the end. Those just few remaining Dark Elf units that managed to survive into the late game all got a ton of damage value. Just looking at these numbers, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and the MVP, definitely the Sorceress of Fire with 2100 damage value. The Burning Heads tore through the entire High Elf front line. And man, it's just crazy to see Burning Head use that effectively. 2100 damage. You almost never see that from a mage.
Yeah, and a pretty usually I think you see pendulums a lot of the time, but Burning Head acting just as effectively here. And that's gonna be it. Call Harmon has taken the win. They will be moving on to the finals of the tournament today.
Huntsman. But yeah, you're right. Without any gunpowder, which, you know, typically cannons and to a lesser extent handguns are the counters to chariots here. So without either of those, he will struggle quite a bit, I think, to deal with the Scourge Runners effectively. Now, he might be able to zone them out from his Demogryphs and Frans with effective use of his infantry, but even just shooting into the Great Swords and charging into them too later on in the game, the Scourge Runners should be getting pretty good value. Now, you can see some nice dodging coming out from Ice Power, managing to avoid that first volley of Huntsman Fire, which is why Scourge Runners really don't worry too much about Huntsman, just because they are quite easy to dodge thanks to their Arc of Fire. And it looks like we will be seeing a Doom Bolt coming down onto the Great Swords here. Should be a pretty effective target as they are so tightly packed and quite high value, and indeed tons of damage coming down there.
Yeah, taking about 30 models and bringing them down to half HP. Surprisingly enough, though, the Scourge Runner Chariots actually don't kill Greatsword models with single shots, but they do put in some pretty nice damage, and here we go. Looks like the main engagement is getting underway quite quickly. Ice Power sending in his infantry to fight these really battered Greatsword units.
Yeah, the Scourge Runners getting in very aggressively now, going onto the Great Swords and then presumably onto the Huntsman. As we do see a little bit of a lag, but it shouldn't be too huge of a deal as long as it stabilizes quickly. But yeah, looks like the Dark Elves gearing up for a pretty big flank overload on their left side, trying to push in and overwhelm the Empire's right flank, where they only have one unit of halberds stationed. They should probably bring some spearmen from their left flank over to support. But you can see so far a really nice engagement from the Dark Elves. And you can see some Dark Riders managing to slip through the cracks of the Empire front line and charge into the Huntsmen, but a really nice counter charge from some Demogryph Knights should be shutting down those Dark Riders very quickly. Now,
However,
this huge flank overload with the double Manticore, Marathi, and some Coldo Knights coming in onto the Demogryphs right now should be a very effective fight. And the Demogryphs from the other side also coming in to peel in, but setting up a Soul Stealer for the Dark Elves, which could do a ton of damage.
yeah, and this is the usual play that you see from Ice Power, forcing a blob from his opponent, throwing down the Soul Stealers, and pulling out really nice advantages through that. There is still quite a bit of a problem, though, that the Huntsmen are still operational, but as soon as the Empire frontline falls, then the infantry will be able to chase them off. The only problem is that these great swords will actually be holding a lot longer than you might expect, and that'll keep those Huntsmen operational for a while.
Ooh, terror routes going down onto the Demogryph Knights as some Manticores come in from the rear, and this seems to be a really nice fight here for Ice Power. All he really needs to be careful of right now is Marathi getting gooned by Franz, but he's managing to pull back and pull up into the sky as he gets some Dark Riders and Scourge Runners from reserve and starts to compromise the Huntsmen. And if the Huntsmen go down, then that's pretty much the last win condition of the Empire removed aside from Franz. And while Franz is very strong, I don't think he's going to be able to actually effectively fight this Goon Squad. As you can see, the double Manticore and Marathi all coming in at the same time onto Franz. This could be really huge, as Franz getting surrounded here and Soul Stealer. He should be taking some pretty big damage as he's already down below half HP.
Yeah, and good timing too, shutting down the Huntsman right as this engage goes down.
Ooh, man, Franz down to
Bolt.
under 500 HP. He routes off and he might shatter or even be killed here.
Yeah, and even if he does recover from the Jade Wizard, that is a ton of damage. It will be a lot of winds of magic to actually bring him back to full HP, and a Manticore even takes off to chase him off. It's going to be the end of Franz, and looking to be the end of Moore too, as Ice Power going for that very decisive gooning play, pulling out a nice win here. I don't think there's much more can do left to pull out the victory.
No, very, very strong stuff from Ice Power. Very decisive play. Seeing that Franz had overextended slightly and just pouncing and going immediately to kill him with pretty much all the killing power in this Dark Elf army. And the Scourge Runners also have just been an absolute terror in the backline. The Empire, while they do have a couple Demogryph Knights, they don't have a ton of mass in general. So the Scourge Runner is able to run relatively free and just compromise Huntsmen at will, and also get some really nice charges into Greatswords, just doing a ton of damage in general.
And there we go. We are seeing Franz now off the battlefield. The leadership of the Empire is now shattered, and that's going to be army losses and a 2-0 victory coming in from Ice Power. Quite decisive, and we saw some classic Ice Power play there. He got a lot of damage onto those Demogryph Knights early on, baiting them in to group up and only having to sacrifice basically a single Dark Rider unit to achieve that, while at the same time shutting down the Huntsman. Just excellent play, really. The Scourge Runner chariots too, getting in a ton of value, same with the cavalry, but Moore still did he still did quite good. I do really like the Greatsword build. They held the front line for a surprisingly long amount of time. He was able to keep his Huntsmen alive quite long too, and they did actually pay for themselves, getting quite a few hundred gold more than he put in, but it sadly was not enough to carry out the victory. Oh, it's going to be well, I forgot to record, so I have to give that a little bit more of a spiel. It's going to be Call Harmon against Ice Power in the finals. For Call Harmon, we are seeing the Greenskins coming in with a nice handful of 6 skirmishers, actually going really hard on the skirmishers this time around, but there's not a lot to punish them, so they will probably be getting in some pretty nice value. As for the front line, it's going to be many Savage Orcs, a few Savage Orc Big Guns, To be expected, as they will win the frontline fight against most Dark Elf units. The usual 8 peak loonies and a lot of, let's see, just a little bit of cavalry actually. One unit of Orc Boar Boy Big Guns, the anti-large variant of the Orc Boar Boys, will be really effective if they can get countercharges, force Goblin Spider Riders to hit the backline, and most excitingly, the Hero Squad, Counter Hero Squad coming in from Call Harmon, 2 Goblin Big Bosses, and Wurzag. Like he might be going for some really strong sniping attempts as we get into the game. But
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Before that, let's go into the Dark Elf army.
Which is pretty wild. It is a full mobility Dark Elf build, which I have never once seen before, ever, at all. So, pretty exciting stuff. We have Morathi coming in with her typical kit. We have double Feral Manticore, kind of obligatory for Ice Power at this point. We have double Dark Rider with repeater crossbows. Then we have quad Scourge Runner Chariot as the front line. And then we have a ton of Dark Riders with shields and a Doomfire Warlock, just a generic Doomfire Warlock coming in. Now, I am wondering if the Doom Bolts on the Dark Elf side will be enough to maybe snipe out Wurzag. I'm not sure how much damage they do to him exactly, but I would imagine it's quite a bit.
Let's see, if he's on foot, it looks like he's on his mount. So I think it should be able to hit a little bit easier, but I'm not entirely sure. I think it will still at least get a few hundred damage onto him. So it could be quite threatening. Of course, the greenskins don't have any healing. And let's go into how this matchup will actually play out, as this is a little bit of a different situation. The Dark Elf Scourge Runner Chariots are going to have to screen away the greenskin archers away from the cavalry. Essentially, that's going to be the most important thing for Ice Power, because the greenskin skirmishers could probably kill off almost all of the cavalry here if left to their own devices. But for Ice Power, the Scourge Runners are very effective in this situation. They'll be able to pick off models. The only worry being is that they might run out of ammunition.
Yeah, I actually think that the Scourge Runners are kind of the win condition in general. They should have enough ammo to counter skirmish quite effectively, and then there isn't that much mass in this greenskin build actually, so they'll be able to run relatively effectively through the greenskin front line of infantry. In the meantime, the Dark Elves don't actually have much killing power in melee at all. Dark Riders are good at chasing units off, but they aren't particularly effective at killing them on the charge. And in fact, they probably lose more HP on the charge than the greenskins they'll be charging will. So with that, the Dark Elves will have to really worry about this mass amount of infantry going into the later stages of the game, and they'll have to work hard to shut them down with the Scourge Runners. And I do think that this game might just come down to whether or not the Dark Elves are able to snipe out Wurzag. If they can, that'll be very effective, but it actually looks like a Doom Bolt going down onto these Orc Boar Boy Biggins, which I'm not entirely sure if that's the most effective play, and it actually is dodged almost completely. One unlucky boar getting singled out there by Morathi, but aside from that, no damage going down whatsoever.
Yeah, and skirmish phase. Well, this entire game will essentially be the skirmish phase, as the Cold One Chariots are already at half ammunition, and they actually haven't killed too many Goblin skirmishers. However, Ice Power does have the 2 Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, and they have enough ammunition to kill off almost all of the greenskin infantry. But whether or not they'll actually have the freedom to shoot onto the infantry is still yet to be decided. In the meantime, the cavalry just continuing to get skirmished by these wolf riders. Some Dark Riders will actually catch a few Goblin Spider Riders, and that's going to be a nice pick for Ice Power. Another pick too on these Savage Orc Big Guns might go completely undeterred unless Wurzag throws down a net here.
Yeah, now I am a little bit concerned with just killing power in general. You can see that the Dark Elves are already using most of their ammo, and they have not really done enough damage for that to be worthwhile at this point. And I mean, honestly, I think that Ice Power expected a completely different build to come in here. I think he expected Stone Trolls or maybe Spiders, in which case the mass amount of armor-piercing missiles and specifically the armor-piercing anti-large missiles of the Scourge Runner Chariots would be very effective. But instead, we're seeing this super wide build from the Greenskins with mass skirmishers and a ton of infantry, which the Dark Elves really don't have a lot of killing power against.
Yeah, definitely a bad build matchup in this situation.
Oh, another nice Doombolt dodge.
Oh my goodness.
What?
Did that
I
just
think we
hit twice?
saw a bug there.
I think
Yeah,
he might
that's
have used
certainly
his
a bug.
Doomfire Warlocks there.
It's possible. But the timing of it makes me think it might have been one of those weird double cast bugs. But I suppose it doesn't really matter either way. It didn't do really any damage. So, really nice dodging coming out from Cal Harmon onto these Doombolts. Now, a nice Soul Stealer about to go down onto a group of infantry, which are relatively clumped up here. And yeah, 3 targets for a Soul Stealer, not bad at all. But those aren't the highest value targets. And so I think that the Dark Elves really need to start making sure that they're using all of their resources effectively, because they are going to start running low here.
Yeah, especially those Doom Bolts really missing their value. If instead they had been targeting heroes, they could have done a lot more damage. But given that Cal Harmon has been pretty on point with the dodges, we don't know if that actually would have been dodged either way. Nevertheless,
Ice Power going in for a big attack now.
And yeah, this is a huge engagement. The big bosses are coming on in, and this is an opportunity for some Manticore sniping. They could dive in straight onto Wurzag, but it could be a bait.
Yeah, they are going in right on top of Wurzag now. The Greenskins need to be very, very, very careful here, because if Wurzag goes down, that might be enough just to basically win this game for the Dark Elves. But Wurzag actually managing to get out quite effectively, and now a Soul Stealer going down on top of the blob that's forming around the Manticores, which will do really nice damage, but at the same time, all of the Manticores are trapped up, and it's possible that Ice Power has just baited himself slightly.
Yeah, even though this is a pretty inefficient engagement, the Dark Elf build is focused on skirmishing and being extremely efficient at trading, and sort of just walking into the infantry could go really badly, but we'll see how it plays out.
Huge Doombolt.
Yeah, tons of spells coming on in. The Savage Orcs are coming in, but a huge AoE onto the cavalry is going to be really rough.
Wurzag's still maintaining 2400 HP, so he's not doing too badly here. The balance of power is pretty even, and actually the Greenskins are looking a little bit thin after that engagement. The AoE is very, very effective there from the Dark Elves. And Murderous Master coming in with a huge terror route on top of all of these Greenskin infantry. Wow.
Oh, wow, okay. So, yeah, essentially really dominating that blob fight there, using his spells. And Wurzag is now once again on the run, and the balance of power switches to the side of Ice Power after that huge flip. Surrounding those Manticores actually ended up turning things for the worse, since the Manticores were, they actually did manage to survive along with Marathi, and it was just way too inefficient for the Greenskins, it seems.
Yeah, that was, man, just a really good use of spells. Now, I do wonder if maybe Cal Harmon wasn't expecting the Doombolt there, because I do think now definitely that one earlier was a little bit of a bug, because I don't think he should have had any charges left, which is definitely very unfortunate if that's the case for Cal Harmon. Of course, it's not like it was an intentional bug abuse or anything, so it
yeah, there were still the Doomfire Warlocks though, so if yet more Doombolts come down, then I'd be a little bit more. That would be confirmation of the bug. But as this game starts to draw to a close, we are seeing a few of the Greenskin forces rally, but Ice Power's been doing a really nice job actually chasing them out. And here we go, another Soul Stealer coming down onto these big guns and 8 peak loonies. Just really good at baiting out these Soul Stealers, it seems. Has been getting pretty good value, and if Wurzag routes off the map, that's going to be a huge loss for Cal Harmon.
Yeah, and it looks like Ice Power is about to go up 1-0 in this series. He definitely has a very good record on his Dark Elves, so maybe It may be possible for Cal Harmon to come back in now that Ice Power has used his best faction, but we'll have to see. It's Cal Harmon's first pick now, and will he pick the Lizardmen or the Wood Elves? I think is what it comes down to.
Yeah, that is there are two very strong factions now, and we'll see if Call Harmon is able to pull it back, but still very nice play from Ice Power. Really making a very decisive play in the mid game to pull out the victory. So for the second game of Call Harmon against Ice Power Total War, we are seeing Ripperdactyls with their anti-infantry. Still very strong and nice mobile unit to snipe out important Tomb King's units. Pterodon Riders, actually, yeah, with two of them being the Fireleech Bola variant, along with the Pohawk's Sentinels. Lots and lots of air pressure here, and actually looking to be winning the frontline fight rather than diving entirely on the back line. The infantry for Call Harmon is going to be some Skink Skirmishers and Chameleon Skinks, with a pretty thin infantry line. Just 3 Saurus Warriors, cohort of Sotek, and some Skinks. Actually, no Skinks. Instead, a really thick infantry front line, instead opting for those Temple Guard and a ton of Saurus Warriors. The Hero Corps, going to be a Manticore Summoner, always good if you want to snipe out monstrous units, and a single red crested skink chief on foot. Just the ultimate budget pick for the Lord, so that more money could go into presumably these Pterodon Riders. So with that out of the way, Dactor, take it away with the Tomb Kings.
Yeah, I think Ice Power is coming in with a really nice build to counter this Lizardman one. He has Cetra the Imperishable atop his War Sphinx. He has a couple of Nehekara Horsemen, a Casket of Souls, which will nuke down the Temple Guard incredibly quickly. We have double Ushapti with Great Bow, just to shoot some Ripperdactyls and Pterodons out of the sky. We have a couple of Carrion, actually, to zone them as well. Then we have just a ton of chaff, a ton of skeleton warriors, a couple Tomb Guard, including the Kepper Guard ROR, and some skeleton spearmen in the backline. So, actually, a relatively narrow-ish Tomb King build. A decent amount of chaff, but not just like a ton of chaff spam. And a lot of the killing power is in the ranged, of course, with the Ushapti Great Bows and the Casket of Souls. I think the Casket of Souls will probably be the MVP of this game if Ice Power is able to win. But Cetra also actually doesn't have a ton that will counter him aside from the Ripperdactyls, so we'll have to see if he's able to hard carry this game as well.
Yeah, I think the main advantage for Call Harmon here is going to be his infantry line. They should be able to win the frontline fight unless the Casket of Souls manages to get some juicy shots onto those Saurus Warriors and Temple Guard. If the air squad can actually take it out, that would be huge, but like you said, the anti-air options for Ice Power are going to be quite strong. Nevertheless, you can still dodge fairly well with the Pterodon Riders, but it's a little bit of a task. So we'll see how effective these Ushapti are as we load into the game, or at least as the game gets started. It's going to be an immediate advance from Call Harmon, and we'll see how this plays out. Do you have any predictions?
Yeah, I think I kind of like Ice Power's build a little bit more here. I think the Temple Guard are just going to be taking so much damage from that casket so rapidly. With that being said, if the Fireleech Bolus, I think, are able to get some really nice volleys onto the Tomb Guard, and especially the Kepper Guard with their regeneration and weakness to fire, then that could be enough for the Lizardmen to push through quickly enough that they're able to win the game anyway. But yeah, a ton of this will come down also to the Ripperdactyls and the Air Force in general, which the Lizardmen have invested a ton of gold into, but appears to be relatively countered by the Carrion and the Ushapti Great Bow. However, the Ripperdactyl is getting right in there and killing some Carrion and actually not taking too much damage yet, though they will be taking damage quite quickly. And you can actually see the Fireleech Bolus nuking this front line of the Tomb Kings extremely quickly. Wow.
Yeah, and in general, the Pterodon Riders, they use some rock drops on the Kepper Guard too. And that's going to be a pretty quick collapse, but the Casket of Souls will still be hammering into the Temple Guard, and it depends on whether or not the Lizardmen actually stall out here. Small pick, some damage on Cetra, just with the catch with these feral cold ones, but nothing too large. And it looks like the Casket of Souls might get shut down by this Pohawk Sentinels, but that's going to take quite some time before it actually falls.
Yeah, the Casket of Souls surprisingly tanky. I do wonder if it might be better to engage it in melee, but I think it can maybe fire through the melee anyway. Now the Fire Leech Bullets are getting some pretty solid damage onto all this Tomb King's chaff. Uh, with that being said, though, the Casket of Souls is also firing quite effectively into the Temple Guard, pretty much taking out one unit, and the Tomb King is able to break the center of this Lizardmen formation, and Cetra is bullying this red-crested skink chief a little bit. However, it's not too bad yet. Now, we haven't actually seen... is there a caster on the Lizardman side?
Yes, a Manticore summoner.
There we go. Okay, I couldn't find him.
Manticore.
There we go. Perfect timing. I almost thought for a second there I couldn't find him on the battlefield, but indeed, that Manticore summon coming in now. That could be huge, actually. As this Casket of Souls is starting to get shut down, and the Ushapti Greatbow are looking like they might be getting compromised right now as well. And yeah, once the Casket of Souls goes down, the remaining infantry for the Tomb Kings will be really hard to deal with for the Tomb Kings. But Cetra still relatively healthy, and if he's able to kill enough of this Lizardman infantry, then I think the Tomb Kings still might be in a decent spot in this game. But the balance of power quite heavily in favor of the Lizardmen, as the Casket of Souls is finally taken down.
Yeah, it did use up all the ammunition of the Pohawk Sentinels, but it does seem like it was worth it, since the Lizardmen had no other ways or no other means of shutting down that casket. So as we head into the later stages of the game now, it does look like a single unit of Ushapti Greatbow will be nearly going down, crumbling, but actually a lot of their models do manage to survive, which could play a huge part. Their ammunition is, if it does get used, will be very good. And as for the other unit of Ushapti Greatbows, they do get engaged on by the cohort of Sotek. They will eventually die, although it will take a while, and they'll be doing a really nice job actually bullying the Ushapti and stopping them from getting their value.
Yeah, really nice plays there. Refuse to die, such an annoying ability to go up against. And you can see man, it really is just gonna be down to Cetra, I think. There isn't much to kill him, and he's very, very healthy. I think the second Manticore summon coming out from the Skink Priest of Beasts will have to kind of be the MVP, because I don't see a whole lot else that can kill Cetra in this army.
Yeah, unless the Skink Chief manages to pull out some miracles. His stats are okay, but not amazing. He would take a lot of damage from Cetra if he was just to go one-on-one. There are some Pterodon Riders, some Ripperdactyls, but everything is so beat up, it could just end in a mass terror rout if Cetra manages to do well here. Especially if he snipes out the red-crested Skink Chief. That could really turn things into favor for the Tomb Kings, just because the ammunition is starting to run low. There's not a lot of Temple Guard left, just a few Saurus Warriors. So we'll have to see how that plays out, as Cetra, beelining it towards that Skink Chief, may get a pretty nasty hit, but misses on the charge. And
ooh, and the second Manticore summon coming in now. This is huge. This is basically where the Lizardmen are going all in to win the game, because the second Manticore summon is most of their killing power against Cetra for the remainder of this game. Will he be able to get the full surround here? I think he needs to charge in with the Ripperdactyls, with the Manticore, and just goon Cetra out right here, right now. However, there should be a ton of DPS coming in onto Cetra with the Ripperdactyls, with the Pterodon, and actually Icepower's just going to pull out.
Wow.
All right. A little bit anticlimactic, actually, but I guess he didn't think that Cetra would be able to survive that, and I think he was probably...
Oh, whoops, accidentally clicked the wrong button there. Okay, we're back. Yeah, the Yeah, that was, it felt a little bit early, but there wasn't much Setra could have really done to avoid that Manticore, and it was a nice reserve Manticore summon specifically just to end out the game there. If he had been too hasty with it, it definitely Setra could have pulled in a comeback if that Manticore wasn't there. But
Yeah.
yeah, there we go.
Ultimate hard carry from these pterodons, and especially I know that the Powhawk Sentinels with their 2k value looks impressive, but that was really just sitting over the casket. The real
Mhm.
impressive units to me here are these Fire Leech Bolus with 1000 damage each.
Yeah.
Definitely not a unit you see often, and very cool to see them used so effectively there.
Yeah, they got in more damage than many of the Saurus warriors, and we did see them focus firing the Tomb Guard for a lot of the game, rock dropping them and then focus firing them with their explosive shots. Of course, the Tomb Kings pretty low armored with their skeletons, and yeah, surprisingly effective at winning that frontline engagement. Even though the Ushapti were able to shoot onto the flyers for a while, it just seemed like there were a bit too many to really kill them all off. Ice Power now against Call Harmon. Bretonia against the Wood Elves. It's going to be a single unit of Way Watchers and a ton of cavalry. Essentially,
Oh
no
my god.
spears, despite the initial prediction. It's going to be, I think, a couple of great Stag Knights, two of them, along with a bunch of Wild Riders hiding out in the forest, three of them, in fact, and the rest of the money being spent on 2 units of Glade Guard. As for the ranged core of Call Harmon, it's going to be 2 units of... Actually, no, just 1 unit of Glade Guard, not even the poison variant, but still pretty effective against the unshielded Bretonian infantry. And the Arawar Hawkeyes of Drakira Way Watchers with their huge leadership debuff and very high damage. If these guys stay safe, should be a nice win condition for Call Harmon, but there's a lot to worry about since he does not have infantry. I also forgot a sneaky Drycha pick here too. For summon, no pendulum, enfeebling foe instead, looking like he really wants to be winning that cavalry fight. So with that out of the way, what do we have for the Bretonians?
Well, the Bretonians are coming in with a much more standard build of King Lewin Leonker with all of his buffs, a Damsel of Life with Earthblood and the Dwellers Below. So we've seen that a couple times today already, as the Bretonians seem to be favoring that now in the meta. We do have a unit of Royal Pegasus Knights. It looks like Quad Knight of the Realm, so relatively cheap on the cavalry department. Quad Peasant Bowmen, 2 of which have pox arrows. 5 Men-at-Arms, looks like the unshielded variant across the board, very interesting. And then 4 Peasant Mobs. So this is not going to be your granddaddy's Wood Elves versus Bretonia. This is going to be something completely different, and I am pretty excited to see how it goes. I've never seen someone try and Rohirrim the Bretonians as the Wood Elves. I'm a little bit concerned just because Wood Elf cavalry tends to trade down into Bretonian cavalry quite significantly. But the fact that it's only Knights of the Realm on the Bretonian side means that I think that the Wood Elves might have a pretty decent shot here.
Yeah, really, the only major threat is a charge in the back from the Royal Hippogriff Knights, and of course, King Lewin coming in too could shift the battle very heavily in his favor for any major cavalry engagement. The Way Watchers won't be able to do much damage to him if he procs his missile resist, and the Archers too, for ice power, will be able to support if there's any big blob fight. So Call Harmon will have to be very careful where he decides to take his engagements. And with the battle getting underway, the Way Watchers will likely be trying to get a position to fire in on these peasant bowmen. That's probably going to be the easiest target that they can pick off. And there we go, an okay initial volley. Ice Power's peasant archers actually stop moving, and that dodges a few of the shots. But that leadership debuff actually coming in, bringing their leadership down all the way to below half with a single volley.
Yeah, this is definitely a concerning map also for this Wood Elf build, because as you can see, the Bretonians are just able to get into this position where Wood Elves are going to have a really hard time flanking them, at least from more than three sides, which definitely smart of Ice Power to be moving up into this pocket here where he's going to have the biggest advantage possible. Now, the Hawkeyes of Drakira, I think, are mostly going to be used for their morale debuff and trying to chain route this Bretonian cavalry, but of course, the Bretonians have pretty good leadership, so they shouldn't be at too much of a risk for mass routes, and there's no terror on the Wood Elf side either for the Bretonians to worry about.
Yeah, now as the battle continues onwards, as this is going to be a pretty long kite game, unless Call Harmon decides to take a big engagement, he's going to have to be quite conservative with the ammunition on these Way Watchers. Just firing blindly into the peasant bowmen will usually get your shots dodged a lot of the times, and one of the ways to bait that out is to get the bowmen to shoot on cavalry, and while they're firing, you hit them with the Way Watchers. Otherwise, their ammunition could run low, and in the far, far late game, once they're out of ammo, that could spell doom for Call Harmon, as the cavalry and can sort of freely engage without having to take extra damage.
Yeah, and let's see here. So you can see Cal Harmon kind of splitting his army up into two massive cavalry blobs, or one massive cavalry blob, and then a few units on the south side as well. And I'm wondering if he's going to be making a decisive move here soon, because I really don't think he's going to get a ton of value just by kiting, especially because, as you kind of alluded to, he only has one Way Watcher, which makes it quite easy to dodge. You just have to look out for the one unit to pop up and fire a volley. Drycha is starting to move in relatively aggressively here, and her Dryad summons could be quite effective. And man, it looks like we might be gearing up for a decisive engagement here. Now, the Wood Elves want to be sure not to take too much damage from Peasant Bowmen before the key engagements start. Of course, the Wood Elves have low armor, so the Peasant Bowmen can do some pretty solid work, especially if the Wood Elf backs are turned. And yeah, we're seeing a decisive move here from the Bretonians, charging in with the Royal Pegasus Knights, knowing that the Wood Elves will not be able to countercharge them effectively. And indeed, a little bit of an overextension, I think, from the Bretonians, actually, as one Knights of the Realm and the Pegasus Knights might be getting caught out here and countercharged and surrounded.
Yeah, Lewin is coming in to support though, but a little bit too slow. These guys will still be getting countercharged. Nevertheless, his leadership buffs should still have a rather large impact. One of the main problems though is that the Hawkeyes of Drakira are able to support in this fight, while the peasant archers are actually occupied in a separate cavalry engagement, where some Stag Knights are actually taking a ton of damage.
Ooh, Dwellers Below onto the Stag Knights and the Wild Hunters of Kurnis. And you can see Stag Knights are really kind of terrible at fighting other cavalry, and that's coming into play huge here. As the balance of power decisively in favor of the Bretonians already, as two of the Wood Elf expensive cavalry units break off, and more are getting worn down all the time. And man, it seems like every second that passes, the balance of power is going further and further in the Bretonians' favor. As I just don't think this this Wood Elf build really had what it took to take down most Bretonian builds in this matchup, unfortunately.
Yeah, essentially those just some really nice decisive engagements from Ice Power essentially just secured the victory. He traded out a few of his Pegasus Knights and Knights of the Realm, but it sort of acted more of a bait for Lewin, as after he was able to land, their leadership stabilized, and with a few shots of the peasant bowmen, that was really all Call Harmon, or all Ice Power needed to do to close out the victory. And there we go. Wow, a pretty decisive win coming in for Ice Power as the new winner of the ranked the ladder's finest tournament. Ooh. All right, so I guess we'll just take a quick look at these damage values.
That was very interesting.
Yeah, the Pegasus Knights actually did really well despite getting surrounded afterwards.
Yeah, they're quite effective in this matchup as long as they don't get Preavana Thramud and shot by Way Watchers. Definitely an interesting build from Cal Harmon. I think we saw though why you don't typically see builds like that, and Stag Knights just being kind of terrible against other cavalry is, I think, the main problem here. Um, they actually lost kind of a straight up engagement to Knights of the Realm, which they're 450 or 550 gold more expensive than. So very unfortunate for Cal Harmon there. And yeah, I mean it's definitely interesting. A cool little thought experiment maybe, but unfortunately it just kind of fell apart in the face of a solid Bretonian army and play from Ice Power.
Yeah, just some nice picks, pretty decisive, and that's going to be it for today. Congratulations to the victor. And let's see, I don't know how to end off this YouTube stream without ending off the Twitch stream, but whatever.